Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T, here on behalf of Bleacher Report with my week 2 day after reaction from the Commanders' 21-18 victory over the New York Football Giants. So, having had a chance to consume the game a second time, having had a chance to consume all of the post-game activities, press conference by the head coach, press conference by the quarterback, press conference by the all of a sudden popular place kicker who just got here, a week ago now, 7 days ago. He got here on Monday last week. One thing was abundantly apparent. This game was one that the Commanders needed badly. They really felt the pressure to win. I don't know if a lot of people realize, but they had just christened the stadium Northwest Stadium. They had a press conference for that, over the weekend. And so it was a pretty big deal, right? First home game of the season, first home game of Northwest Stadium. Wearing the gold pants, first home game of rookie Jaden Daniels' NFL career. And a lot of those players, for that matter, in the locker room had never been at home as a member of the Washington Commanders. Remember, we have the highest turnover rate in the NFL in terms of roster. So a lot of these guys had never played here as Commanders, right? So some of these guys had played here as a member of the visiting team, like a Zach Ertz, for instance. Many years he played here as a Philadelphia Eagle, but and he was here week 1 last year as an Arizona Cardinal. But a lot of these guys had not played here as Commanders, so it was a pretty big deal. But I think one of the biggest takeaways in terms of just the post game and listening to them talk was how important this win was. Last week they were upset. You could tell that they felt like they had prepared better for Tampa Bay in week 1, and the result was nowhere near up to the standard that they had set for themselves. And they understood that the Giants aren't a good team, and they needed to find a way to win. And it was not a great performance by the Commanders by any stretch of the imagination. And they've got a lot of work to do, and we're going to talk about that today. But they needed to find a way to win. And that's the name of the game in the NFL, is just find a way to get it done. We'll correct the mistakes as we go, but it's a lot better to correct the mistakes with a win than it is a loss. And so you could see the smiles. You could see the jubilation. Owner Josh Harris came into the locker room, obviously for the first win at home in the newly christened Northwest Stadium, and gave away 2 game balls, one to each Adam Peters and, of course, head coach Dan Quinn. And so it was good to see those guys get their first game ball, their first win of hopefully many to come with this organization, leading them back to the promised land. We'll see what happens. And then obviously Austin Seibert got a game ball yesterday for his 7-for-7 performance. The best field goal kicking day in franchise history. And he just got here, like I said, yesterday was 6 days ago, today 7 days ago, right? It's an amazing story. You could tell he was kind of soaking it all up and kind of taking it all in. But when you actually get to the product on the field, I wanted to talk about some standout players from yesterday. Then I wanted to talk about some of the takeaways from yesterday and things that have to be corrected. I don't know if you understand this, but the next opponent up on the schedule is the now 0-2 Cincinnati Bengals, who are going to be as desperate as one can get in a week 3 game at home on a Monday night, right? They have to win this game to avoid 0-3, because generally there's no coming back from 0-3. It's already hard enough. We've seen the statistics over the years on what being 0-2 means in the NFL. Imagine dropping to 0-3. When your schedule came out, there was no way anyone could see the Bengals being 0-2 coming into this game, because they were supposed to beat New England at home to start the season off. You knew there was a chance they could lose to Kansas City. And then the way that they lost to the Chiefs with that penalty late adds more fuel to the fire. You got to think you're going to get their best effort, and they're probably going to have one of their best players back from injury in that game in T. Higgins. So we've got plenty of time to talk about that. But let's talk about some of the best performances of the day. So going back and watching, one of the guys that I don't think gets enough credit from this fan base, and I'm somewhat guilty of not giving him enough credit because he doesn't take the football away. He did it in this game, though, and that's Benjamin St-Juste. Now, it's not the conventional way you think about a corner taking the football away by making an interception. He's the pass breakup king, if you ask me. But those count too. And he had some big ones in this game. The Commanders did not force a lot of punts, only 2 in this game. And he was almost directly responsible for one of them. He had 2 pass breakups on the second punt of the day forced by the Commanders, including a 3rd down pass breakup over the middle of the field on a pass intended for Darius Slayton. But one of the biggest plays of the game, I think the Malik Neighbors drop is probably the biggest play of the game. But one of the biggest plays of the game, if that one is won, the Benjamin St-Juste forced fumble is probably the second biggest play of the game. The Giants were on the move. They were looking to score again. They had raced down the field in about 4 plays, started at their own 26, and by the time Benjamin St-Juste was able to poke that football free with that peanut punch, they were already inside the Washington 35-yard line. And so that was a very momentous play. All offseason, we had heard about ball is life. Defense has to create turnovers. It's a big point of emphasis, yet we had not done it really in the preseason or in the regular season opener. To see that happen at an opportune time like it did on Sunday was huge. So you couple the 6 tackles, the 3 PBUs, and the forced fumble that Benjamin St-Juste brought to the table, and on a day where tackling was sparse for the Commanders yet again, we'll talk about that here in a second, you got to give him a ton of credit. I don't think the Commanders fans give him enough credit. He deserves it after this performance, and hopefully this will be a confidence builder. I didn't think he was terrible last week either, to be honest with you. You know, he got beat for a couple of scores, and that's all anybody wanted to talk about. He was in great coverage. He just didn't get his head around, but that's been a symptom of his issues throughout his career, is not getting his head around, right? But he continues to grow with this coaching staff. Hopefully he turns into a really good player this season. We'll see. But that was a great, great step in the right direction. A huge one. Jaden Daniels. Having had a chance to watch Sunday Night Football and Caleb Williams, having had a chance to watch Bo Nix struggle against the Steelers, which we knew he would, Jaden Daniels has far and away been the best rookie quarterback through 2 weeks. Now, it's early, small sample size. All of that is apparent. However, he has not turned it over. He's the only rookie quarterback to have not done that. And he continues to just be effective and efficient. He's completing over 70% of his passes through the first 2 games. Only 7 incompletions in week 1, 17 of 24. Only 6 incompletions in week 2, 23 of 29. Threw for over 226 yards. He was fantastic in this game. 10 carries, 44 yards. He now has the most rushing yards after 2 weeks in franchise history. Obviously, you know who he overtook by doing so. He's been stellar these first 2 weeks. His calm, cool demeanor, poise in the pocket. How about a game-winning drive? Tie ball game, got to have it. And he goes out, and one of the first plays of the drive, he strokes a dart to Noah Brown, who made his Commanders debut and made it with a bang with his 4 catches for 54 yards. That was a big play to kick that drive off. It settled everybody down. It got us pretty much in the field goal range. We were just on the outskirts there, but it put us in a really good position. And you kind of felt confident that, hey, we're going to do this, right? And it was his play throughout the day. You know, he got the wind knocked out of him. Everyone was holding their collective breaths. He came back in the game 2 plays later, and he seemed like a guy that was more locked in and focused after that. Stayed in the pocket, hung in there, started to deliver the football. And I told you guys last week that eventually he's going to grow into a guy that's going to hang into that pocket and make throws. But until he gets comfortable, those legs are going to be his security blanket, right? His safety net. Well, he needed the safety net less and less as that Giants game wore on. He was really good. And despite Washington not finding the end zone, not a single time, having 6 red zone trips, having a lot of mistakes that kind of prohibited them from finding the end zone, Jaden Daniels continuously put the team in a position to score. As I told you guys yesterday, had 8 drives against Tampa Bay that were real drives. Had 8 drives in this game, but 7 that were real drives. And of those 15 real drives in 2 weeks, the Commanders have had 12 scoring opportunities. That's efficient football, and it starts with your rookie quarterback. He was really good again yesterday in helping the Commanders win their first game of the season. Brian Robinson Jr. had a career day, and I just thought that he was phenomenal, and I felt good for him. You know, a lot of people were showering him with praise yesterday, and you could see that big smile on his face because he had been waiting for this opportunity since he got here. And the lack of touches and carries and opportunities, I've always said this about Brian Robinson, and I probably said it yesterday to you guys. I'm going to say it again because it's one of the things that I've been preaching, you know, since he got here. And it's never been about talent with Brian Robinson Jr., always about opportunities. He just hasn't had enough of them. And he was like, I can't tell you the last time I got 17 carries. That felt good, right? Forget about the yards. 17 carries felt good to that man, right? He made the most of those 17 carries with 133 yards rushing on the day and 2 of the biggest carries of his NFL career, one of 32 and another of 40. He was dynamic yesterday. Refused to go down, was physical. On that last drive, he grinded out some tough yards to put them even closer to make it a chip shot field goal. The contact balance, the yards after contact, the physical nature in which he plays, had a run on the left sideline where he stiff arms a giant defender and stays in bounds and gets another 5 yards on the play. It's just who Brian Robinson Jr. is. We've known that for a long time, and now it's good to know that we have a staff that's also acknowledging that this guy has a chance to be a game changer. You couple him with Austin Eckler and what they've become as a 1-2 punch here, and we talked about this last week. I told you guys it's going to be fun watching those two in the backfield because they're both dynamic in their own ways. Austin Eckler had a kickoff return for a touchdown in this game that was negated by penalty. We'll talk about that here in a second. And so those two are going to be fun to watch. But Brian Robinson, he stole the show in week number 2. He was dominant, for lack of a better term and phrase. And so glad to see him finally getting the just due that he deserves because he should have had a 1,000-yard season already. But there were forces at work that didn't allow that to happen. He's well on his way this year with performances like the one he turned in on Sunday. So lastly, last but not least, Austin Seibert, you definitely deserves to be mentioned here. 7 of 7 in his first career game with the Washington Commanders, 5th NFL franchise he's kicked for in the last 5 years. So it's been a roller coaster ride for him and his family. He talked about kicking, you know, at an oak tree that's near his home, not kicking actual field goals through uprights, but kicking at an oak tree. He would kick like 30 balls. He said him, his wife, and his daughter would go to the little oak tree near his house and kick the ball there. And he said that's kind of his focus, right? Get up there, go through my process, and just aim for the oak tree, right? Right down the middle. And just about every one of his kicks split the uprights right down the middle. There was never any doubt about any of his kicks in this game. He looked good. Commanders fans are hoping that we've solved our kicking woes. I'm not going to go that far quite yet, but it feels good to know that we've taken a massive step in that direction because of who we are as a team and who we're going to be this year. We're going to play a lot of close games. We're not going to blow out a lot of teams. At least it doesn't feel like it right now. Who knows? If you turn those 7, scoring opportunities and those 6 trips to the red zone and 5 of them are touchdowns, you're well on your way to blowing somebody out, more likely than not. But I can't see this team doing that anytime soon. And so if you're going to win games, you're going to have to make field goals. You're going to have to make kicks, extra points, et cetera, et cetera. And he's off to a whale of a start, going 7 of 7, including the game-winning kick, setting a franchise record with 6 for 6, and then, capping it off with the 7th field goal to win it. It's a great start. It's a great story. Now let's see how he builds upon that performance. I think he's going to win NFC Special Teams Player of the Week off of his performance, off the strength of that performance. We'll see if that comes to fruition. Last week, Jaden Daniels won Offensive Rookie of the Week. And so I think back-to-back weeks, the Commanders will be receiving some sort of award from the NFL. I think this time Austin Seibert will be the recipient, but we'll stay tuned for that. So those were some of the standout performances from the game in particular. But I wanted to mention some of the things that, upon further review, I was able to look at it. And a lot of these are obvious, clear and obvious from watching the game. The first thing we got to start with are the penalties, man. This is 2 weeks in a row now that the Commanders have been undisciplined, had 7 penalties last week against Tampa in the loss. The good thing about the penalties thus far, and this is the only positive, they haven't been big chunk yardage penalties like pass interference way down the field type penalties, right? They've been of the 5-yard variety most of the time, but they're still killers, right? It started with the holding penalty on the very first play of the game on the kickoff that was returned for a touchdown. And you have a holding that didn't impact the play in any way, shape, or form that was so unnecessary and it negates a touchdown opportunity for Washington to start the game off. And I thought one of the keys to the game against the Giants was going to be you have to start fast because the Giants struggled a week ago and they got beat up pretty early in that game versus the Vikings, and the Vikings set the tone. And I thought Washington needed to do the same thing. And a kickoff return to start the game off would have done exactly that. It would have allowed the Giants to have that, oh my God, here we go again, woe is me type of feeling. Instead, it's negated. Now, we put together this marathon drive, 16 plays, 9 minutes and some change of the clock, but we settled for a field goal. And that's a win for a defense after being on the field for almost 10 minutes to only give up a field goal. And the penalties were the reason, a huge part of the reason. I can't wait to watch the all-22s because I want to see exactly what some of the play calls in the red zone were. But the penalties went a long way in determining, I think, some of the conservative nature of some of those calls while they were in the red zone. Obviously, they were going to go for it on the first 4th down of the game. They had already gone for it on 1 4th down on that possession and converted. They were going to go for it again on 4th and 1 after a 14-yard Austin Eckler run made it, 4th and 1 essentially. And then you had a false start penalty by Ben Sinnott. And that was the theme of the day. We get into the red zone. We were in the red zone 6 times. We had 5 false start penalties in the red zone in this game. And I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite like it before. I've watched a lot of football in my life. All right. I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite like that before, where every single time you make it to the red zone, you have some sort of mishap that from a penalty standpoint that puts you in a tough down and distance situation and makes it hard for you to find the end zone and pay dirt. It was crazy, right? So penalties are something that they have to clean up. It's been a problem for the first 2 weeks. And for a group that is talked about being disciplined and not beating yourself, they've done that in the first 2 weeks. And they're very fortunate to be 1-1 right now and not 0-2 because of the amount of penalties they've had in the first 2 contests, especially the 10 penalties that they turned in yesterday versus the New York Giants. That's not a winning recipe, right? Let's stay there with the red zone offense. Obviously, the penalties went a long way in, hurting them, but they still had opportunities to get into the end zone and they just couldn't. And these weren't, we ended up at the 18-yard line, so it counts as the red zone trip. These were deep ventures into the red zone. You're talking inside the 10-yard line, and we can't get in the end zone. And, again, penalties hurt us in a lot of these instances, but still, there were runs that didn't work. There were pass concepts that didn't get it done. I want to watch the all-22s to kind of see what's going on, but I can tell you this. It was very frustrating to not be able to find the end zone. With Jaden Daniels' legs, it's a huge threat down in the red zone. RPOs should be a big flavor of the day in the red zone. I thought there were things that we could have done, maybe should have done, that we didn't do in the red zone that might have made his job and the offense's job a lot easier. We tried to get creative. We put Brian Robinson, in the Wildcat, slid over initially. Jaden Daniels was in the gun behind the center. He slides over into the, B gap area, allows Brian Robinson to slide into the center position or guns position behind center. And Sam Cosmi pulls early before we can snap the football, right? It's just little things like that we got to lock in on the details, And so that's something that they got to clean up in the red zone. We got to score points. And it's the stark contrast from week 1 when we were perfect in the red zone, 3 of 3. So, we're still trying to figure out what this team is in terms of red zone efficiency. 1 week you're at 100% efficiency. The next week you're at a 0% efficiency. So now we got to figure out what's what, right? The next thing I want to talk about, this was a big topic in the community yesterday, and it's still kind of buzzing today, and that's the play of Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne. And I want to talk about the scheme that they're running with Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr., because the scheme is one that allows them to play aggressive, get up the field, but a lot of times it's running them up the field out of their gaps. And if the linebackers aren't going to crash down aggressively to replace them, you're going to give up hits in the run game like they did against the Giants and Devin Singletary. And I think I want to watch the all 22s. It's kind of easy to see without the all 22s what was going on. I didn't focus in enough on those two in particular, but I will because, again, I just expected Daron Payne, of the two. Payne was very disruptive. I told you guys that last week. He was very disruptive against the Buccaneers. He just didn't get Baker Mayfield on the ground. But this was a team last week that had 8 tackles for loss in the run game, okay? Was very aggressive around the line of scrimmage. And I just thought against a Giants team that had struggled to pass protect the week before, that had struggled in the run game the week before, that we would have similar success. And that success was nowhere to be found. I don't even know if we had a single tackle for loss in this game. I think we had one. I think we had one with Bobby Wagner crashing through the line of scrimmage and getting to the ball. I think we had one tackle for loss. But it wasn't the aggressive approach that I'd seen the day or the week before prior against Tampa Bay. And Allen and Payne weren't factors in this game. There was no pressure on Daniel Jones whatsoever. And you got to credit the Giants. I think when I went back and watched, I saw a lot of pseudo max protects where they're only running 3-man concepts down the field. They're keeping 7 guys in to protect because they're going heavy play action fake. They're keeping the tight end in. They're keeping the running back in. And they're double teaming guys. And they're making sure that Daniel Jones had ample time to throw the football. I also thought, though, there were a lot of issues with the play calling defensively. Some of it was not Joe Witt Jr.'s fault in terms of the play. Like, for instance, they had to bench Michael Davis because he couldn't make a tackle. He couldn't take the proper angle, right? We talked about that yesterday. How many times are you going to try to come inside and make a tackle when there's no help to the outside? You have to take an outside angle approach so that if a tackle is broken, it's broken to the inside where the help is coming from so that there is no big catch and run afterwards. He keeps crashing inside, taking an inside angle to try to make a play on the ball, and the tackle misses both of them. And now Malik Neighbors spins to the outside. There's no help out there, right? All your help is coming from the inside. So he's running away from the help as he's gaining yardage up the field. 3 catches in that same manner and fashion that were just backbreakers. 3rd and 12 was one of them. Like, you just can't have this type of ineptitude, right? So they bench him and put in Noah Igbenogany. That's not the fault of Joe Witt Jr. What is the fault of Joe Witt Jr. is to continue to play man coverage on 3rd and long situations, knowing that the Giants are running mesh concepts and allowing your corners to get caught up in the wash and allow Malik Neighbors to come through on the other side wide open and making easy throws for Daniel Jones. You had to, at some point, you're rushing 3 and you're dropping 8. I don't understand why you're not playing zone behind that. right? Why are we continuously playing man? And I thought, and I get it, when you're not trusting your corners, you don't want to blitz. I'm not telling you to call a cover zero, but there are ways to confuse an offensive line. There are ways to force them to slide protection one way, bring the pressure from the other way. I just thought they would be a little bit more creative in what they were doing from a blitz perspective. They really weren't in this game. The blitzes were obvious where they were coming from. The Giants did a really good job of picking them up. We only sacked Daniel Jones once in this game. I didn't think the coverage was confusing enough. It was easy. It was man. It was a lot of man coverage, and guys were getting open. A lot of easy pitch and catch on those play action fakes. The Giants were taking advantage of the fact that guys didn't want to get run by, so they would run them off deep comebacks. And Daniel Jones was just hitting those all day long. And so I didn't think the scheme was disruptive enough. The players weren't disruptive enough. And then I'd be remiss if I don't talk about the tackling. My goodness, for the second week in a row. Right now, it feels like we're one of the worst tackling teams in football. And this is becoming a huge problem. I thought week one, okay, it's week one. You didn't play a lot of ball in the preseason. Okay. It was hot in Tampa. We were tired. First game back. Yeah, okay. I made all the excuses in the world for them after week one from a tackling standpoint. All right, week two now, the same excuses can't be used for a second week in a row. Yet we were horrendous tackling again, really in the secondary in particular. I talked about Michael Davis and him just being worn out on that right side of the defense, just not being able to make a tackle. It was an embarrassing display from him. And I was championing him. I was the one saying they need to put Michael Davis in the game. And I felt embarrassed as if he was a family member or something, because here I am vouching for this man to get on the field because I think he can have an impact. And this is what he does when he gets his opportunity. After the game, Dan Quinn said, look, this was an in-game benching. This is not a season-long benching. We're not getting rid of him or anything like that. We're big proponents, he said, of finding ways to win a game and making moves in that particular game to try to get it done. And then we'll come back to the drawing board and figure it out moving forward. So it was not a good start for Michael Davis. He didn't get a single defensive snap the week prior against Tampa. Now you see why, right? I've said this for a long time with him. He's a press man cover corner. You can't use him in off coverage. You can't use him in zone. He needs to be up pressing receivers if you want to utilize him correctly. In those instances where he missed the tackle, he was in off coverage, and it showed. But that's no excuse. He didn't tackle well. I didn't think this was a great tackling game for the rest of the unit. We gave up too many yards in the run game, too many big hits for Devin Singletary, and they're gonna have to figure out how they want to address this defensive line and them. Like, I like them being aggressive, getting up the field, but if you're not gonna replace them with linebackers immediately and fill those holes that are being vacated by those guys being aggressive and trying to blow up these plays, those quick hit and runs up the middle are killing us. It happened against Tampa last week. I think the Giants were more prepared than Tampa was the week before, because the Giants, they were almost running duos up front, double teams up front, and it was those quick hitting runs, right? Double team the two defensive tackles, kick them out of there and go, right? If you can get up to the second level and get to the linebacker and just get a piece of him, now we're off to the races. And they were doing that. The Buccaneers weren't running quick hitting plays. Theirs were slow developing. I think that's what allowed us to have the disruption in the 8 tackles for loss. The Giants adjusted, and they were hitting those duos quick up inside, and they were getting up onto the second level quickly with the running game. And they got to fix that. They got to fix it. So a lot of things that have to be cleaned up. The third down defense continues to be a problem. The Buccaneers were 9 of 13 last week. The Giants were 4 of 8 in this game, so 50% there after giving up nearly 70% last week. There's too many issues defensively right now for this team to be successful throughout the season. They're going to have to clean up these issues. I will say there was a slight improvement. You created 1 turnover, and you went from forcing 1 punt a week ago against Tampa to 2 whole punts this week versus the Giants. Hey, how about that? 2 whole punts forced in this game. 3 whole stops, right? 2 punts, 4 stops technically, 2 punts, a forced fumble, and a drop pass on a 4th down that created a turnover on downs. So we are making slight progress, but I wish I could tell you that a lot of this was our own doing, but it's really not, right? You did force a fumble, though. And with the way we're taking care of the football, 1 or 2 turnovers forced a game is going to be huge in terms of trying to help this team win a football game. If we can continue to take care of the football and create a turnover or 2, it's going to give us a chance. It's going to give us a chance, but this defense is going to have to be better, and we cannot shoot ourselves in the foot. We're just not good enough to shoot ourselves in the foot with penalties and mistakes and going 0 of 6 in the red zone and expect to win. We were lucky to be playing the Giants in week 2. Very fortunate that the opponent was the New York Giants and not anybody not named Carolina other than the Giants. Probably lose the football game if it was any other teams but Carolina or the New York Giants in week 2. And Giants fans will tell you, if we had our kicker, we would have beaten you. And that might have been true. That very well may have been the case. But you didn't. And you didn't. So the Commanders are 1-1. And I'm feeling good. Day after, I'm feeling great. This is Victory Monday. Celebrate! It's Victory Monday. We haven't had one of these. Did you realize we had the longest losing streak to end last season? So we haven't had one of these Victory Mondays in a long time. Our last victory of the season came in week 9 last season versus the New England Patriots. We haven't had a Victory Monday in quite some time, okay? So relish this, celebrate, feel good, okay? I don't care how it came, how it looked, all right? We won. We haven't had one of these in a long time. Embrace it, okay? So we'll see what this thing looks like moving forward. Again, let's get to the comment section. We'll take a couple of comments real quick, and we'll get out of here. Let's see. We need to try and sign a corner ASAP. There's so many good corners out there. So many good corners, like who? I don't see them doing anything at corner right now. I'm not saying that they won't eventually try and do something, but they have some other guys on their practice squad that they may try first. This is what I would advocate for right now, finding out who can and can't play here on your roster before you go outside looking for help. I don't agree with there's so many good corners. There's not many good players out on the market this time of the year at any position, period. Your best bet looking for help this time of the year is at kicker, as you just saw with Washington finding Austin Seibert, because, kickers are everywhere and you never know what you're going to get. But there aren't many good football players that can actually help an NFL roster this time of the year available, sitting at home waiting for the call. This is just not the case. Let's see. The D is horrid. To beat the Bengals, JD at 5 and crew will need 4 touchdowns. Maybe they will. I think the Bengals are going to have something to prove in this game coming up. The Bengals haven't scored 4 touchdowns themselves in any game this season, but that doesn't mean they aren't due for an explosion here coming up in week number 3. Let's see. And this is a good one here. Allen and Payne aren't generating enough pressure and too often are being washed out of plays way too easily because they're trying to be aggressive and get up the field. And that's a part of the scheme. So to me, that's a defect of the scheme, not of them. In previous years, they were, I wouldn't say two gapping, but they weren't getting up the field and they were really kind of staying on their blocks, waiting to see what the running back would do and then playing off of that block and getting to the running back. Now they're being asked to just get up the field and be disruptive. But if teams are going to do what the Giants did, and I think that's the best way to attack them, is to run duos up front. If they're going to run themselves out of the play, let them. All you got to do is when they run up the field, slightly nudge them out of the way. And now instead of having that double team, you can have that other lineman get up to the second level and get to that linebacker if he doesn't come down fast enough. I thought Frankie Luvu had some chances to come down a little bit more aggressively and take away that lane. And so that's something they're going to have to, if they're going to continue to run this scheme the way that they're running it, and I don't see them changing who they are, they're going to have to be more aggressive. And that comes with time. It's just striking downhill, being aggressive. I still don't think they're playing as fast as they could play. And so we'll see if they're able to do that more, a little bit better moving forward. JD looked a lot more comfortable sitting in the pocket in the second half. I agree. He really, after that hit that took him out, I thought he kind of settled in after that. I agree with that as well. So Murphy says, we got so much pressure against Tampa. Why do we feel like we have to change strategy every week? Because you have to adjust to your opponent every week. The plays and just a great example of that is how Tampa ran the football versus how the Giants ran the football impacted the way we were able to be aggressive up front. Tampa had slow developing runs, outside zone and stretch runs, which allowed us to be aggressive and get to the ball carrier in the backfield. The Giants had quick hitting runs. There was no hesitation. There was no wasted motion. These were duos, boom, handoff, attack the line of scrimmage immediately, and they were getting through immediately, right? So you got to change your game plan and how you attack a team based off of what it is they're doing. You can't one size fits all every team that you're playing against defensively. That's the philosophy metaphor. Stop the run on the way to the quarterback. And they're living proof of that. Like literally, that's what they're trying to do. I've never seen it that literal before, where they're literally like, we're going to get the quarterback. Oh, it's a run play. Well, it's too late. The running back's already run by you, right? They're literally, they look like they're trying to stop the run on the way to the quarterback, and they're not doing a very effective job of doing that right now, right? So anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the day after reaction as the Commanders get it done versus the New York Giants, 21-18 with 7 field goals. 7 drives, 7 scores. The last time the Commanders did that was back in 2021 against the Green Bay Packers, but where they didn't punt, rather. Okay, they've never had a game, I don't think, like this here in the last 2 decades where they didn't punt because of scores. Yeah, you can sit here and point to them being all field goals. How many NFL teams have had 7 drives, 7 scores? I can't think of many. I remember the Buffalo Bills doing it to the New England Patriots in a playoff game when they beat them like 48-7. It's 7 drives, 7 touchdowns. But it's rare for an NFL team to not punt in a game because they scored on every possession. I've heard of teams not punting because they scored on a bunch of possessions, but they had a turnover or they went for it on 4th down and they didn't get it. And there are things that contributed to them not punting. When we played the Packers in 2021, we didn't punt that day, but we turned it over like 3 or 4 times in that game. That's part of the reason we didn't punt. We didn't punt because the Giants couldn't get us off the field. That should mean something to you as a fan. Now, what matters most is what you do when you get to the red zone, but you got to get to the red zone first. A lot of explosive plays for the Commanders in the game on Sunday, too. That should also be something that is very encouraging. A lot of explosive plays by the Commanders in this game. Now it's just taking those explosive plays, whether it's Austin Eckler on the screen, Noah Brown on a catch and run, Brian Robinson with the 2 runs. You know, no matter what it was, now we got to take those explosive plays and turn those into touchdowns. And again, that's a part of the process that they're going through. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on behalf of Bleacher Report. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next week. Until then, you guys take care, be safe, Have a good one. We're 1-1. Celebrate!